Well, we got another new episode of Young Justice, and I think it was pretty great. Might even call it magical. We have kicked off the next story arc in an episode entitled Odnu. It's time to follow Zatanna, dig into some chaos and some order, and even meet some new proteges. It looks like the cosmic balance between order and chaos is out of whack, and of course the Young Justice team has to come to the rescue. But before we dive in though, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell for all the updates. Also, the big giveaway. We got a PlayStation 5 to give away at 25,000 subscribers. All you need to do to get in on our giveaway is be a subscriber and leave us a comment. Also, while you're at it, make sure you check out that free week of Skillshare down below. It's a spectacular way to develop all of those superhero skills you need for that ongoing war on crime, all while not diving too deep into your pockets. Plus, it helps the channel out, so we really appreciate it. Well, if you're a fan of this channel, you know, me personally, I am a huge fan of Klarion the Witch Boy, so I've been looking forward to this particular story arc. Now, episode 9 was entitled Odnu, which is actually the word undo backwards. In case you didn't know, that's exactly how Zatanna says her magic words, and she is the focus of this week. We're going to dig into the episode, but before we start, I want to make sure you know it's not spoiler free. We're going to talk about some clear details from the story, and if you haven't seen it yet, make sure you go watch it and come back. I don't want to spoil it for you. Now, this week opens with a grand history lesson of the universe and how chaos, order, and all of those yellow and red crystals tie together. Our predictions were right. Yellow is order and red is chaos. These are the Lords of Chaos and the Lords of Order. Now, throughout the episode, we're reminded several times that there is a balance between the two, and our new baddie seems to be forcing all of that out of whack. You know, quite honestly, most of us think of order versus chaos as good versus evil, but this balance is more important, and it's actually a battle between stagnation and anarchy, and I think this week's villain is pushing that right over the top. Now, one of the best parts of this week is we get to meet Zatanna's new team. Actually, I quite enjoyed the scene of them chasing and capturing those trogs. The opening really did a great job of demonstrating the various types of magic from Zatanna and her pupils, some of it rather revealing. We actually find out who all three students are. Obviously, one of them is Traci 13, but the other two were kind of big reveals. One is Khalid Nassour, and if you're a comic book fan, you might recognize that name. He's actually using what appears to be some sort of green magic, since it appears to be somewhat plant-based. And more interestingly, the other student is Mary Bromfield, also known as Mary Marvel. Now, all three of these are pretty darn cool, and because of that, I'm not going to dive deeply into them right now. Stay tuned, we're actually going to do a video on all three of our students. I really felt like Zatanna in a leader and teacher role was really well done. It was totally positive and fun and pretty much exactly what you would expect from her. I totally loved that carousel scene. It was right out of Mary Poppins and gave the episode a kind of fun, childlike flavor. Speaking of child, that's our new villain. That's right, that little girl's name is Child. The arrival of Child pretty much alerts every magic-sensitive character in the world with that massive wave of chaos energy. Dr. Fate, Blue Devil, and more importantly, Clarion, who's totally caught off guard and obviously worried, all seem to react to this happening. Now, I may have made a bit of a mistake, because we actually thought this was Shivering Jemmy. But once I watched her raise Flaw, it did indeed confirm to me that she's not Jemmy, but is actually the character known as Child, who is also a Lord of Chaos. Also, did you notice her anchor on Earth 16 is not a cat or something easy to just shimmy away? It's a diamond statue. Flaw is basically a diamond golem and near indestructible. Now in the comics, Child's typically a male character, but she mentions this form is acceptable, so this might be a bit of a change. Quite honestly, this feels like a combination of the two characters put together, and that would be, well, rather chaotic. Changes could be afoot when it comes to this character, but this isn't unusual. Remember, in the comics, Clarion is not a Lord of Chaos at all, so Greg and his team have their own narrative working here. Child is a full-on Lord of Chaos, and it appears to me she is indeed here to displace Clarion. At least what we can determine by the limited amount of time we get to know her in this episode. Raise your hand if you think Clarion probably broke some of the rules and actually invoked her presence. Now, Clarion and Vandal Savage's relationship seems to be playing very big into the story. The historical connection between the two characters is fully explored. Clarion and Vandal, or Vandal as he was known in early times, have a pretty destructive history, even when Savage's motivations appear to be noble. I have to say, his utopia really did have a Garden of Eden ring to it, and you could almost see how Chaos Incarnate could be attracted to that level of order and peace. Clarion's murderous machinations don't take the Vandal, but honestly, against Clarion, what could he do? Or should we say, what could he do now? I really think this is where we are going. I think Vandal Savage has had a long-term plan, and it kicks off in this episode. Now, during this encounter, Clarion eventually becomes fascinated with Savage because he simply won't die. He's clearly no mortal man. Savage is always a man with a plan, and appears his deal with Clarion will indeed play into whatever is going on with Child. I think originally he was on some mission that now Child is here to enforce for the other Lords of Chaos. We will have to wait and see, and how the Phantom Stranger works into this, I absolutely have no idea, but I found his presence pretty interesting. Keep in mind you should keep this all in a certain context, because the Lord of Order himself, Nabu, is actually the son of Vandal Savage from ancient Babylon. So I have to imagine somehow these two things will tie together in this story. We did get a full and updated Madame Xanadu, and her return is pretty well done. We haven't seen her since Kent Nelson made a fool out of her in Season 1, but she appears to have gone from fraud to real deal. I love what they've done with her. Updating the character to make her more like the comics was probably a pretty good idea. Her lair is something pretty fantastic, and her new power level is absolutely well aligned with the character we know from the history of the comics. I do have to wonder though about some of her other allies. What about characters like Constantine, Deadman, and Swamp Thing? Are they going to show up? We also had that little subplot this week with Garfield. You know, he is a total mess. I really like how Blue Devil is trying to help him out, but to me, he is clearly spiraling downward. I am actually worried we could be getting some sort of suicide awareness type story because he isn't improving at all and just drifting further and further into darkness. It is really hard not to feel bad for the guy, and I don't think he's even close to the end of the suffering that he appears to be going through. Now, in this episode, we did get a ton of magical combat, and I loved it. Although Zatanna's team was effective, and their variations was really interesting to see, quite honestly, Clarion was awesome. He is totally vicious and near perfect when it comes to magical combat. As I've said, he's one of my favorite characters, and seeing him no holds barred in this episode was awesome. Zatanna and her crew were absolutely no match, and there was no doubt he was actually going to kill them. Now, this was the first chapter of this arc, and I think it's probably going to run all the way to episode 13 when we get our break, but I have no confirmation of that. All in all, I'm going to give this episode an 8.25 out of 10. It was really good. I love magic in comics. Zatanna, along with most of the other magical characters in the DC universe like Madame Xanadu, have a special place in my heart, so I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do with this episode. Now, we are going to add a couple of videos because of this episode. We're going to do a character focus on all of Zatanna's proteges, breaking each one of them down, their history with the team, and where they might be going in this arc. We also are going to do an updated video on Child. The comic book version is very different than Shivering Jemmy, and although I feel bad about that mistake, I think we should continue talking about it and try to clarify it some. So, what did you guys think? Did you like this week's magical episode of Young Justice? And who is your favorite protege character? Sound off in the comments below. If you like this video, make sure you press like, click subscribe, and if you don't ring that bell, you're not going to get any updates. Peace.